Welcome back to another episode of DiceDaddy. I'm Bobby, and today we're going to be talking about Counterspell and how it has become one of the most Nerf spells that exists in D&D. Let's go ahead and get into it.
DiceDaddy.
Alright, you all have roll initiative. You can see that there's this massive orc headed directly for you, Eric. He wields back his broadsword to attack immediately.
Ha! Counterspell.
You can't counterspell, it's a melee attack. You can't
Oh, yeah,
counterspell a melee attack. Yeah, no, you
I
can't
knew that.
counterspell melee, yeah.
I think.
So he's gonna hit, absolutely, yeah. So he slices down, slashing into your chest as blood begins to pour out, dealing you 14 points of slashing damage. You see the dark wizard Mnemonic in the background. He begins to twirl his hands around, making arcane gestures in the air, and begins to fight.
Aha! That's a spell. Counterspell. Counterspell. Counterspell.
That you can counterspell, but he's gonna counterspell your counterspell.
Oh,
Yeah, he can do that.
that's lame.
No, you can check the rules. He can definitely do that.
Well, you know,
Yeah, make sure you mark off that spell slot. Gotta make sure it's marked off.
good thing I didn't want that spell slot for anything else.
Alright, so we're going to go ahead and keep going on this. He's going to go ahead and fire a finger of death at you. Yeah. Make a Constitution saving throw. Oh, 6 total? Alright, you're going to take 57 points of necrotic damage. Oh, that kills you. Oh, well, better luck next time. So as we saw there in that example, you have a player that really wants to use Counterspell, and as a result of rulings that have taken place, whether you want to call it RAW or RAI, RIA, whatever it may be, you've decided to take this spell that this player has and make it almost completely useless. So let's talk about the dynamics of that. As we know, it was ruled way back when that if a caster is actually casting a spell and an opponent decides to counterspell that spell, the caster of the spell can choose to use their free hand to cast counterspell. Casting 2 leveled spells at the same time, this has been debated very heavily as being good, being bad. Personally, I find this to be a horrible ruling. Let's talk about why that is. First, it nerfs the ability for counterspell to actually be effective in combat. And this is the reasoning behind that. This is why I kind of make that logic and that decisiveness from it. If I am a wizard and I love Counterspell and I'm choosing to use one of my slots that I have as a 3rd level slot to hold Counterspell all the time, I'm putting it there for a reason. I want to use it at some point. I want it to be somewhat effective for me. If I go into combat and that spell becomes less effective every time I'm in combat because they're just simply counterspelling what I'm trying to counterspell, it doesn't really help anybody. It's not really effective for me. I'm going to get discouraged. I'm going to drop it off my spell list. And the moment I do that, then I'm going to be at risk of someone counterspelling me. So really, why do I have Counterspell? I have Counterspell so that I can use it specifically only if somebody else uses Counterspell. That's redundant. That's a circular logic that doesn't really help you in the actual in-game mechanics. Secondly, whenever you cast Counterspell, you waste and expend that slot, and as a result, that slot is gone. You're not going to get that back till a long rest or a short rest, depending on your class levels or what your class features are. So what we actually in turn do is we have, number one, a spell that is become circular and doesn't actually help me in the in-game mechanics. It's basically just there as a backup to counterspell a counterspell. It's only effective against counterspell at that point. Secondly, it wastes a spell slot during combat, which you could use that to slot any other spell that you have in your book, a damage spell, a supportive spell. So it becomes an inert spell that doesn't really help us. Lastly, and this is kind of my overall final arching point of the counterspell, is that if you're gonna have a player that really wants to use it and they want to kind of enjoy it, you're gonna have to really very closely balance your encounters to ensure that they can still have fun with it. Not every wizard they go up against should have counterspell to counterspell their counterspell. That gets redundant. Not every sorcerer should do it. Nobody should really do it in the process. So if you do have a player that is definitely into the counterspell, like we saw in that video, and they really wanted to use it, and you're just crushing their dreams every day, if you're going to continue to use the rule in that way, balance your counters so that you don't actually have every opponent using counterspell to counterspell to counterspell. I'm saying counterspell, 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 counterspell. I hate even talking about it. End all be all, if you have a player that's excited to use a spell, the last thing you should do is come up with a way to make that spell ineffective in combat altogether. Because then what was the point of them even taking it? I hope this video was helpful to you, and I appreciate your watching your views. Thank you so much.